Hey guys, we're going to start reading a new read aloud. This one is titled Charlotte's Web, and we're going to need our reader's notebook for this. So make sure you take out your reader's notebook out because we're going to be writing in our reader's notebook. So I'm going to share my screen with you guys so that we can start our read aloud. So this book is titled Charlotte's Web, and it's always been like a favorite for many people. Because it's been around for such a long time. I actually remember my teacher in 3rd or 4th grade reading this book to us. And this is by E.B. White and pictures by Garth Williams. So in order for us to get started, I'm going to ask you guys to do the following. Let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger. So in your reader's notebook, I want you guys up at the top, maybe switch your notebook so it's horizontal so that you have more space to write. But up at the top, you're going to write, good readers always infer using textual evidence. We always do that all year long. We've been talking about, how does the character feel? How do you know? You use evidence from the text. And so you're going to basically create a triple T chart in your reader's notebook, and it should say inference about character traits, and then textual evidence is the second one. And then the third column is going to say, this makes me think, and motivation. So we're going to be talking about character traits, evidence to support that, and then you really thinking about character motivation, which we've been doing a lot of towards the end of these last few weeks. So if you need to pause it here so that you can copy it down. And how cute is this little pig right here? Very cute. Okay, so pause me so that you can create your triple T chart. All right, hopefully you've jotted it down, you paused where you needed to pause, and we're ready to start. And just to remind you, as we always do, we always talk about these things, right? So in chapter 1, and for many of the chapters, we're going to be talking about good readers always find the meaning of unknown words. Good readers infer about characters' feelings and motivations using textual evidence. Good readers always make connections to other texts. So we're going to start by reading chapter 1. And as I read, I'm going to pause, and whenever I write, I'm going to ask you to write. So chapter 1. And every chapter has a title, and I'm purposely not going to tell you the title because I want you to come up with your own title for each of the chapters. So chapter 1. Where's Papa going with that axe? Said Fern to her mother as they were setting the table for breakfast. Out to the hog house, replied Mrs. Arable. Some pigs were born last night. I don't see why he needs an axe, continued Fern, who was only 8. Well, said her mother, one of the pigs is a runt. It's a very small and weak, and it is very small and weak, and it will never amount to anything. So your father has decided to do away with it. Do away with it, shrieked Fern. You mean kill it, just because it's smaller than the others? Mrs. Arable put a pitcher of cream on the table. Don't yell, Fern, she said. Your father is right. The pig would probably die anyway. Fern pushed a chair out of the way and ran outdoors. The grass was wet and the earth smelled of springtime. Fern's sneakers were sopping by the time she caught up with her father. So far, just the first page, and we've already gathered some information about Fern. So I'm going to pause so that I can write. So it seems like thinking about Fern as a character. So she's upset. I'm going to go back to the text. Do away with it, shrieked Fern. You mean kill it just because it's smaller than the others? Mrs. Arable put a pitcher of cream on the table. Don't yell, Fern, she said. Your father is right. The pig would probably die anyway. Fern pushed a chair out of the way and ran outdoors. Okay, so I'm thinking, I infer Fern seems like she cares about this little pig, even though she hasn't met him, and she's worried about him because the mother keeps calling him a runt, and runt is a juicy word. So basically, anytime there's like a litter of kittens or puppies or any animal and there's a runt, it's probably like the smallest of the bunch of the litter. And she's really concerned. So it makes me think, I think Fern is compassionate. You're going to write with me, compassionate. When you're compassionate, you care about others. because on page 1, I'm looking at my book. On page 1, it says, let me see. It says, because on page 1, Fern says, I'm going to copy the quote down. Do you do away with it? Do away with it, shrieked Fern. Right? Shrieked Fern. You mean kill it? Just because it's smaller than the others. We already can sense that she's compassionate. She cares about this little pig. I think Fern is motivated by, I'm gonna keep reading. I wanna see what she's motivated by, like what's making her save this pig, right? So we're gonna keep reading a little bit more. Please don't kill it, she sobbed. Please don't kill it, she sobbed. It's unfair. Mr. Arable stopped walking. Fern, he said gently, you will have to learn to control yourself. Control myself, yelled Fern. This is a matter of life and death, and you talk about controlling myself. Tears ran down her cheeks, and she took hold of the axe and tried to pull it out of her father's hand. Here's a picture. Fern, said Mr. Arable, I know more about raising a litter of pigs than you do. A weakling makes trouble. Now run along. But it's unfair, cried Fern. The pig couldn't help being born small, could it? If I had been very small at birth, would you have killed me? Mr. Arable smiled. Certainly not, he said, looking down at his daughter with love. But this is different. A little girl is one thing. A little runty pig is another. I see no difference, replied Fern, still hanging on to the axe. This is the most terrible case of injustice I ever heard of. Wow, that quote is really sitting with me right now. So this is the most terrible case of injustice I ever heard of. It makes me wonder if she's motivated by justice. I think Fern is motivated by a sense of justice because she's upset to find out her father is willing to kill a small creature. A queer look came over John Arable's face. He seemed almost ready to cry himself. All right, he said. You go back to the house and I will bring the runt when I come in. I'll let you start it on a bottle like a baby. Then you'll see what trouble a pig can be. When Mr. Arable returned to the house half an hour later, he carried a carton under his arm. Fern was upstairs changing her sneakers. The kitchen table was set for breakfast and the room smelled of coffee, bacon, damp plaster, and wood smoke from the stove. Put it on her chair, said Mrs. Arable. Mr. Arable set the carton down at Fern's place. Then he walked to the sink and washed his hands and dried them on the roller towel. Fern came slowly down the stairs. Her eyes were red from crying. As she approached her chair, the carton wobbled, and there was a scratching noise. Fern looked at her father. Then she lifted the lid of the carton. There inside, looking up at her, was the newborn pig. It was a white one. The morning light shone through his ears, turning them pink. He's yours, said Mr. Arable, saved from an untimely death. And may the good Lord forgive me for this foolishness. Fern couldn't take her eyes off the tiny pig. Oh, she whispered. Oh, look at him. He's absolutely perfect. She closed the carton carefully. First she kissed her father, then she kissed her mother, then she opened the lid again, lifted the pig out, and held it against her cheek. At this moment, her brother Avery came into the room. Avery was 10. He was heavily armed, an air rifle in one hand, a wooden dagger in the other. What's that? He demanded. What's Fern got? She's got a guest for breakfast, said Mrs. Arable. Wash your hands and face, Avery. Let's see it, said Avery, setting his gun down. You call that miserable thing a pig? That's a fine specimen of a pig. It's no bigger than a white rat. Wash up and eat your breakfast, Avery, said his mother. The school bus will be along in half an hour. Can I have a pig too, Pop? Asked Avery. No, I only distribute pigs to early risers, said Mr. Arable. Fern was up at daylight, trying to rid the world of injustice. As a result, she now has a pig, a small one to be sure, but nevertheless a pig. It just shows what can happen if a person gets out of bed promptly. Let's eat. But Fern couldn't eat until her pig had had a drink of milk. Mrs. Arable found a baby's nursing bottle and a rubber nipple. She poured warm milk into the bottle, fitted the nipple over the top, and handed it to Fern. Give him his breakfast, she said. Here's a picture of Fern's brother, Avery, and he has a rifle and a dagger. And here's a picture of Fern bottle feeding the baby piglet. A minute later, Fern was seated on the floor in the corner of the kitchen with her infant between her knees, teaching it to suck from the bottle. The pig, although tiny, had a good appetite and caught on quickly. The school bus honked from the road. Run, commanded Mrs. Arable, taking the pig from Fern and slipping a donut into her hand. Avery grabbed his gun and another donut. The children ran out to the road and climbed into the bus. Fern took no notice of the others in the bus. She just sat and stared out the window, thinking what a blissful world it was and how lucky she was to have entire charge of a pig. By the time the bus reached school, Fern had named her pet, selecting the most beautiful name she could think of. Its name is Wilbur, she whispered to herself. She was still thinking about the pig when the teacher said, Fern, what is the capital of Pennsylvania? Wilbur, replied Fern dreamily. The pupils giggled. Fern blushed. So I'm going to pause for right now. There's a lot so far that we've learned about Fern and Avery and Mr. Arable and Mrs. Arable, and now we know that the pig's name is Wilbur. And there are a few juicy words in this book, so we're actually gonna, I wanted to show you guys, I think I already sent it to myself. Let's see. I did want you guys to write a summary of the chapter, and Miss Alonso she wrote an amazing summary in her notebook, and I wanted to see if I could show it to you guys. Let's see if it's coming up. Yep, it is. Okay, so give me a second, guys, while I open it up. And let me share my screen again with you. So I'm going to show you Mrs. Alonso. Basically did something in her notebook that's a summary of chapter 1, and I wanted to show it to you guys because I want you guys to do something similar in your own notebook. Let me see if it lets me copy it. I'm probably going to have to snip it. And then let me stop share so I can do it on my Google Slides. 1 second. Okay, let's do it now. Let's see if I can share this now with you guys. Share it. Okay, here we go. All right, so basically, Mrs. Alonso and I were talking about some things that you guys can do towards the end of the chapter. And this is one thing she did, and I think I want everybody to do it. So you're basically going to, in your reader's notebook, aside from the chart that we just did, you can write Charlotte's Web at the top, chapter 1. Above, you can write who the characters were. So for example, she has Mr. Arable, Mrs. Arable, Fern, and Avery. But now Fern is the girl and Avery is the brother. And then on the side, outside of that pink line, you can write juicy words as we read. And some of these were today, like runt. I told you what runt means. Queer, we didn't talk about it, but when somebody has a queer look, like maybe they're giving a queer look, queer means strange. Infant, like when a baby is born, they're considered an infant. Sopping, I think we talked about earlier. So in the summary, Mr. Arable wants to get rid of a baby pig runt. Fern stops her father by saying, if I had been very small at birth, would you have killed me? So basically, Mrs. Alonso wrote out a whole summary of chapter 1. And I want you guys to work on that right now so that you guys have like an understanding of what's happening in the text. And of course, you can go back in the video, like you can pause the video and like as you're writing the summary, you can re-listen to the chapter, which is pretty awesome. The other thing I wanted to show you is this is a bonus. You don't have to do this, but I had a lot of fun doing it because now we have all this extra time at home. So I want to show you, you can make like a little comic strip of a chapter that we read for class. So like I made one and it's gonna look backwards to you, but I made the comic strip going down, and it's also another way to summarize. Like I have in the beginning, a few seconds later, after, and then at the end of the chapter, and I just basically have the most important parts of the text. So like, here's the part where like Fern is like, where's Papa going? And then she starts sobbing when she finds out that he's gonna kill the little runt. And then the mother is like, well, put the carton on her chair. When basically the dad's like, okay, you can take care of it. The mom is like, put it on her chair. And then at the end, she's basically bottle feeding it. So this is a bonus. And then the last thing I do want all of you to do, if you do this one as a bonus, or even if you don't do this one as a bonus, you can still do this for the summary that you're gonna make like Mrs. Alonso made in her notebook. But based on the sequence of events in chapter 1, I think I should title this chapter, and I'm gonna come up with the title for this chapter. I know I have it in the book, but I'm thinking of another one. And mine would be, based on the sequence of events in chapter 1, I think I should title this chapter, Fern Saves a Piglet, because that's what she ends up doing in this chapter. And then I'm just gonna add it on my comic strip. And if you want to do this and the summary, well, the summary I want you to do for sure, but if you want to do this as a bonus, ask your parents to take a picture of it and send it to my phone number. They have my phone number, right? So make sure you try to do it. We don't want you guys to lose out on your education, so make sure that you're trying to do as much as possible. All right, guys, I'll see you in the next video. See ya.